So good evening. It is November again, so it's time for the five-year forecast. And we can all see the numbers on the five-year forecast, but I thought tonight I'd give a little information behind those numbers. So when we think about the district and our strategic plan, we have 5 pillars, and one of those pillars is financial stability. So tonight we're going to focus on the district and financial stability. Our strategic objectives have been to make sure that we are informing our community on how our district is funded, how we utilize our funds, and what our needs are. We also ensure that we are aligning our district resources to our instructional priorities, and we continue to partner with our community and have that transparent funding cycle. So as we've been discussing over the past several years, we do have 2 emergency levies. One will expire in December of '27. The other will expire in December of '29. Both of these emergency levies are currently used for current day-to-day operations. So we need these emergency levies to maintain current operations, or we will have to reduce operations.
And what happens if we don't pass those?
We will have to reduce operations.
By how much money?
7.3 million, 11.3 million, and I'm going to get to our funding cycle, which is more, so almost 30% of our operational budget.
Yeah. And what happens when that happens, if that would happen?
80%.
Couldn't we run the school district, the state would come in and take us over?
There are options. I mean, we could run a district. It may not be the district we have today.
Right.
And if we decide not to, then the state would take us over. So we'll.
Just so everybody out there in the public knows how important these levies are that are coming up.
When we think about our operations, last year we spent 76% of our general fund budget on instruction and instructional supports. We also spent another 20% on operational supports such as transportation, custodial maintenance, including utilities, and our technology. We also want to make sure we have that continuous communication. And as part of the continuous communication, every spring we release our annual budget document. So this informs our community on how we are aligning our resources, what our budgets are, and how we are tracking our goals. We also have our November and May update to the 5-year forecast, which is this evening for November. Each fall, we mail a PAFR out to our community. This is a summary of how we ended the previous school year. And then around in December, we have our audited financial statements that we issue out our CAFR to. And again, it's to make sure that we are continually informing our community on how we are funded, how we utilize our funds, and what our needs are. So when it comes to our annual budget document, this is so that we can show how our funds are allocated and spent, how our resources are aligned to our instructional priorities, how our long-term financial health and our levy cycles are for the district. We also show in the current annual budget document the previous 3-year goals and how we measured them, as well as what our new 3-year goals are and what will be measured for those. And here's an example of one of our buildings. It shows what our goals are that we're tracking. Has the QR code if you'd like to see the whole document, and also the budget. So for Colerain High School, the annual budget to operate Colerain High School is $13 million.
3 minutes are up, Amy.
I know. So when it comes to our facilities, which is one of our largest assets, we have 5 buildings that are over 50 years old and need to be replaced. We have safety and security upgrades that need to be done. We have renovations in our buildings that we could do, but when you're renovating, you have to bring buildings up to ADA compliance. So sometimes a small renovation can lead to larger costs because of the changes in codes. We currently have $35 million in deferred maintenance, not including Colerain Elementary or Colerain Middle School. This started at $46 million. We used $6 million from the ESSER funds for our HVAC, and we also pulled money out to fund and seed our capital maintenance plan, which includes our 3 newer elementaries and now Montford Heights Elementary. And our middle schools are over capacity, and we're using all of our spaces for instruction. We were able to set aside $20 million in one-time funds to help our community fund our master facilities plan. And with that, we were able to build Colerain Elementary with the help of OFCC, which is the state CFAP program, the ELP credits that we earned on the previous project, as well as our $20 million a portion of our $20 million to not go to our community and ask for a bond to build Colerain Elementary. But this does not include the preschool portion that was set in our master facility plan. So when we think of the district, there are various buckets of money or various funds within a district, but tonight we're going to focus on the general fund only because the 5-year forecast is over the general fund, and that is our general operating budget. When it comes to revenues, 2/3 of our revenues come from our local community and property taxes, and about 1/4 of our funds come from the state. The rest is from like interest, TIF payments, tuition payments from other schools when students are educated here. Some of the changes that we had in revenue was we had the 2023 reappraisal, and we also had increasing interest rates, so we were able to earn an additional $1.4 million last school year just due to the higher interest rates. Those rates are starting to reduce, so over the forecast we have reduced the amount we'll be able to earn, and it'll start going back down to like a normal range. When we look at our state and local revenue and the funding formula, the state requires a local community to fund its public school district first, and the state pays the difference. The state requires our local community right now to pay 70%, and that percentage is going up as the state's percentage is going from 30% down to about 17% through the 5-year forecast. We are also moving from a formula district to a guaranteed district, which means due to property values increasing, incomes increasing, and our enrollment decreasing, we are becoming even wealthier, which means our community would have to fund our district even more. However, the way the funding formula works, there is a 20/20 guarantee, which says as a school district, you will not receive less from the state than you did in 2020. So we're going from being funded on the formula as it was being phased in, so it also phased down the less revenue that we were receiving, so we were able to kind of cushion like that, but as it goes to being 100% funded, that full impact of the formula giving us less dollars then moves us on to the guarantee. The state guarantee, as I said, the increase in property values from the reappraisal, our local income values that are going up, as well as an aging community. So we have this chart that I'll show you in a little bit that shows we have fewer students in our district and fewer school age in our population, as well as the 20/20 guarantee. And back in 2020, we had 600 students who were our resident students who were being educated elsewhere. So the funds would come into the district, and then the money would go out of the district. When the new Fair School Funding Plan started with the state, they no longer funded us for those students, and we no longer paid for those students. When we're going on to the guarantee, in 2020, we were funded for those, so that shows up in the guarantee, but we do not have that expense. So when we look at how property values increased, the 2023 reappraisal increased our property values by 30%. And then you can see previously the update year has a small increase, and then there'll be another small increase in 26 when there's another update year. When we look at our tax rates, in 2019, we had an increase in tax rates when we had our last emergency levy. In 2022, we had the Montford Heights bonds roll off, so that reduced the millage and tax rates. And then with the reappraisal, as taxes are flat when passed, as values go up, the millage comes down to collect the same revenue. So the millage is coming down. And when you look to see how we compare within Hamilton County, the green arrow is Northwest Schools. So the state determines the projected income that they used in the foundation formula. So they have our local income increasing in their projections. This is our chart of our student population from 23 through 28. and the dark purple is where we're reducing student population. The lighter the green is increasing, and then dark green would be increasing student population. So as you can see for our area, we're currently having a transition where we're an aging community and we have less students. Over time, that should cycle through, and then we'll have more students again, and then back to an aging community. So this is where I was telling you back in 2020, we had 600 additional students that we were funded for and that the money went out of the district for because they were educated elsewhere. Then in 2023, the funding formula changed. Those students still attended the schools where they were going. It's just the way the funding occurred no longer flowed through the district to the other district. The state paid the districts directly, and they started funding schools where students attended instead of where they lived. So for our expenditures, being a public school district and even a governmental entity, approximately 80% of our expenses are in personnel because we are a service industry. So right now, it's 77% of our projected expenses are in personnel between salary and benefits, and another 19% in purchase services. Purchase services include our utilities, our special education-related services. Some changes in expenditures for this coming year and through the forecast is we had negotiated items. For purchase services, we have an increase in our special needs services, as well as we had some one-time projects that were over our 3% partnership that the board approved. We had our foster and homeless student transportation continues to increase. That's an unfunded mandate. The state requires that we pay for transportation for our students if they are foster placed or homeless, no matter where they are currently staying. We transport them back. We have state mandates such as high-dose tutoring that we're required to do, and we have an additional, our One Plan goals, so we're trying to increase student achievement. And then because of our property values going up with the reappraisal, there's also auditor and treasurer fees, so when they collect the taxes, they have an increase in the fees. So as the tax revenue goes up on the revenue side, the fees go up on the expenditure side. So as you can see, we consistently are either one of the lowest or the lowest per pupil expenditure in Hamilton County. When we look at our special education trend, over the past 14 years, our special education has gone from 10% of our overall budget to 20% of our overall budget. But when we look at our total operations over the past 14 years, our total operations have increased 20%, or about 1.5% per year. In 2019, prior to the last emergency levy, we told the community that we needed to pass the emergency levy and that we would also be back in 3 years. So we were guaranteeing that that emergency levy would last 3 years. In 2023, we passed it for the third time. We passed it again in November of 21 and again in November of 23. And we have shown that we have extended the need for a new inflationary increase in revenue from 3 years to 8 years. And with our 3% partnership with our community, we continue to utilize our financial parameters, making sure we spend more than 70% on instruction, using our staffing plans, aligning our resources to our instructional priorities, continuing our commitment to student achievement, and making sure we're evaluating the condition of our facilities. We also have a cash balance policy, and this is to protect our community from things like state cuts, recessions, and inflation. We also may need to pull from it for one-time expenditures, similar to our catastrophic plan when we said we would utilize 1 month's worth, or up to 1 month's worth for Corinne Elementary, Corinne Middle School building failures, relocation of preschool, relocation of central office. This also allows us to earn investment income on our cash balance reserves and also helps us with our bond rating. The larger your cash reserves are, the better your bond rating, similar to your personal credit rating, and we currently are a AA2 bond rating, which saves our community money by being able to borrow funds at a lower interest rate. So we did have some one-time expenditures that were approved, and this was the Colerain Elementary by the bricks that were coming off that we needed to secure, the Colerain Middle School parapet that we had to remove, the preschool renovation that was approved last month, and the relocation of the central supports offices that was approved this evening. Per our cash balance policy, we want to ensure that we have 60 days in our cash balance, as well as when we looked at the timing of our levy cycle and our partnership with our community, that's a 5-year, $5 million rolling levy cycle. So when we look at our cash balance over the 5-year forecast, our cash balance is starting to decrease. As we talked about, we said 3 years. We're projecting this to be out 8 years. So this gives us a picture of all our operations for the 5-year forecast. The light blue is our revenue. The dark blue is our expenditures. The orangish color is the emergency levies. And so over time, last year we did have expenditures exceeding revenue, and that was because we transferred one-time monies into seeding our capital maintenance plan as our community asked us to maintain our buildings. So we're able to have a plan for our newer buildings and maintain those, as well as helping our community with the master facilities plan. And so in the dark blue, so over time, revenues and expenses equal, and then expenditures start to increase and exceed revenue with inflationary pressures. At the end of the levy cycle, expenditures will exceed revenue, and then we also have the emergency levies as they expire. They come off, and so this shows that if it renews, this is where the revenue would be. So that emergency levy is in the previous years and is orange in the later years because that is when it expires or would roll off. So when it comes to levy cycles, there's a bow tie effect. Because levies are flat when passed, you have to ask for more in the early years of a levy cycle to spend those additional funds in the later years of a levy cycle. The negative 17 is really a positive 12 million, but we moved 30 million last year in transfers of one-time money. So, and the reason we would move one-time dollars out of the general fund instead of using for day-to-day operations is if we continue to use those funds for day-to-day operations when we have other needs, we would continue to use those funds out into years where we would not be able to sustain that amount of revenue nor ask our community to be able to support minimum of 30 million plus annually per year. So we align that one-time money to one-time needs instead of falsely using it on day-to-day operations. You want to align your revenues and your expenditures for each year. So this shows that we were bringing in additional revenues at the beginning of the levy cycle and then spending into those revenues at the end of the levy cycle, and then you start over with a new levy to have for inflationary reasons to have additional revenue for ongoing operations. This is just another picture that shows with a renewal and without the renewal, the impact of our bottom line and our cash balance, and that we're still negative even with the renewals if we go out to 29. So with during this 5-year forecast, our fiscal year 17 emergency levy will expire on December 31st of 27. So tonight we need to decide also if we are going to show the renewal in our 5-year forecast, to report that to the state that our intention is to go to our community and ask for those funds to be renewed, or if we do not, then we would need to develop a plan on what the reductions would be, or if we decide to do something different, some revenue, some reductions, and what that would be. And then right after the 5-year forecast, so the forecast goes through 29, but it goes through June 30th of 29, and so December 31st of 2029, the second emergency levy will expire. So we have created a financial foundation for our district, and now it's time to maintain the financial foundation of our district so that we can ensure there's an optimal learning experience for all of our students. We continue to increase student achievement by aligning our resources and looking for operational efficiencies. So our next steps are, as we look at the emergency levy that is rolling off, do we want to renew? And then not only to renew the emergency levy that we're currently operating on, but you can see the expenditures still exceed that. So that's that 8 years where we're now needing additional inflationary revenue to continue to maintain current operations. Our cash balance over the 5-year forecast starts to decrease. And remember, our cash balance policy says 60 days. So once we get out to about fiscal 28, which is that 8 years, we start dipping below 60 days. So upcoming decisions are to maintain and or reduce day-to-day operations by looking at our 5 mil 5-year rolling levy cycle, as well as our cash balance and when the 60 days is, so about fiscal year 28. It takes the Board of Education to authorize any revenue, whether it's a renewal or increase in revenue. And we have a compounding effect. So the sooner that we ask for revenue, the less revenue we have to ask for. But also the sooner we make reductions, the less reductions we have to make because it compounds. So the revenue would compound over the expenditures. When we look at how our cash balance is changing over the 5-year forecast and what the state will look at, they look at our cash balance, the revenues, compared to the annual revenues. The yellow bars are fiscal caution, the pink is warning, and the red is fiscal emergency. Once we start dipping into fiscal caution, they'll ask for a plan, which per our cash balance policy, we're required to provide a plan anyway, so we would be there. And so our funding options, 25 is the current fiscal year. 27 and 29 are the renewals we've just spoken about. 2 options, just to give you some information, is if in 26 there was a 4 mil 5-year levy cycle versus in 28, which would need to be a 6 mil 5-year levy cycle. So as I said, things compound. So once you get to the point where you've actually met and dipped into past your 60 days and you're trying to reestablish, you have to ask for more than if you ask sooner. Ideally, we would need to ask in 27, but that is also when we have our renewal. So with that, I answer any questions, but also know that I need to know whether we need to leave the 27 renewal on our forecast or if we want to remove the 27 renewal on the forecast before we submit to the state.
You want our opinions now?
I have to know what you want me to do. It's not.
I
It's
say
all-
leave it on.
Amy, I would say leave it on, but lower it by 1/10 of 1 mil. So when we advertise it, we can say the yes vote actually lowers your taxes. We did that and it worked, and it was not really, it did lower taxes when we built the 3 elementary schools. Remember, we were able to do that. It's the negligible loss of money, but it, would certainly be a selling point. I just think in this environment, I heard on the news today they want to build a new arena down, maybe somewhere else, not downtown, and they want taxpayers to pay 70%. Of course, we still have the Paul Brown Stadium thing where they want us to pay the majority of that. It literally has gone to where there's a tax madness, where just people are just to the point where they're voting no on everything. My niece teaches at a more affluent district on the east side of town, and their recent income tax levy lost significantly. And it's a community that has more money than we've got, but people are just to the point of, we've had enough. And all these sports things, as much as I like them and you can go to them, when you've got owners of the team and the top 50 richest people in the United States, and then he's asking Joe Schmo and White Oak to help pay for his, where he does business. I just have problems with that. But that's my suggestion, just a slight reduction.
What would that be dollars-wise, and what would you cut?
Well, I would I mean, if we cut 1/10 of 1 mil, it's not lying, it does reduce taxes.
But something would have to be cut from the operations then.
Well, Amy, if you would go back to that slide from all the administrative people at the high school, it's like your 5th slide from the very beginning. I was looking at that in amazement, the number of deans and instructional specialists. Now, I know I was there a long time ago, but when I was there, Colerain High School and Northwest, but I can't really address Northwest because I didn't go there. We were on level with Oak Hill, Sycamore, Madeira, the best school districts in the, but looking at that, 22 counselors, I remember maybe 6. There were no deans. There might have been 1 media specialist. There were no assistants. There might have been 1 nurse. Of course, back then, you didn't need security, and we didn't have a social worker. So look what that costs. That's where I would start, right there.
Yeah, there's,
Some of them are state
they,
mandated.
we
I know.
need all of those.
Well,
We
but
probably need more of those people right there.
I'm just telling you, if you ask me where
Well,
we
it's-
would cut.
I
You're not
know, I
cutting,
get it.
yeah.
It's
I would
just a
not.
different time, Chris.
I know it's
when we were
different.
high-
I
when
mean,
we were in high school.
We didn't have security back then, Jim,
I know, but
But 146 assistants, I don't remember any assistants.
A lot of our kids need one-on-one attention.
Well, okay, but, you know, I mean, you asked me where I would cut.
Yeah, no,
And
I'm
that would
just-
be a place, 22 counselors, Mr. Gibson and Miss Cook, and a third lady, that's all I remember. And we had, you know, a lot more students back then than we do now. I mean, we had, in my class, 717 people graduate.
I would also say on this emergency levy, the first time it was passed by our community was in 2012, and it has been renewed in 17, and then now again, and it's the same annual dollar amount that we've been operating on since 2012.
Well, admittedly, Amy, when you see a sign, will not raise your taxes, that's a big thing. But it's an even bigger thing, you know, when you can say, it'll lower your taxes. Well, of course, if it failed, it would lower them even more, but we can't do that. But
Right.
that's just, we did it before. And with the 3 elementaries, it was a slight reduction, and it passed very easily, so. And times weren't as tough back then on passing school levies. Just my thoughts.
I would say leave it as is.
I would say leave it as is, but it's sort of like knowing you live in Tornado Alley and you need a storm cellar, but yet you don't prepare for it. So I would say my suggestion would prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
So create a plan.
That's, if you work for GM and you know GM production is going down tubes, there's a good probability you're not gonna be working on the factory line, so you don't call DirecTV and up your package. You start making cuts. And this all plays into why I think every single penny we spend needs to be looked at under a microscope.
And as you can see, it's a perfect storm.
Exactly.
I would keep it on there.
Okay. So I recommend that the treasurer and the superintendent recommend the Board of Education approve the November 5-year forecast and assumption as presented, including leaving the 27 renewal on. And then we'll have to make a decision before May as far as reductions or new inflationary revenue, because while this is one part of our storm, it's really a 3-part process.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay, thank you.
I need a motion and a second to approve.
so move.
Second.
Amy, just curious how many hours you put into generating that?
Months. Thank you.
Sorry, months.